Hey, all, it's KR, King of D&D Homebrew, talking today about the importance of creating goals for your players, or should I say, allowing them to create goals. Because we often think, when players come into the typical RPG setting, or say whether it's a fantasy setting, whether it's a classic D&D, or something else where they want to improve their character, they want to get levels, get more power, get more items, and watch as their character can do all these cool abilities, right? And that's their goal. But in fact, that really should be secondary, especially in a homebrewed sandbox, to the goals that are created out of the player's interaction with your world. And, just to subdivide, you have short-term and then long-term goals. A short-term goal might be there's some orcs harassing this village and we want to go there and either defeat the orcs or convince them to leave these people alone or move the people or whatever, but remove this problem, this direct situation. Whereas a more long-term goal might be that we've heard about this dungeon and we know it's quite extensive and we want to go there and explore it and eventually discover what is the secret behind, there's legends and stuff of this. It's the remains of an ancient wizard's tower or something like that, and it has many secrets inside, and we know that's going to take some time. And if you start players at first level, let's say, typically they're going to have a lot of short-term goals. You're going to present them either through their backgrounds or the first session 0 or first session with some basic tasks or some, basic adventure hooks that are pretty short-term. You're not necessarily going to start the campaign with everything is focused on defeating this big bad villain. Right? Because it's a sandbox. You don't want to have some long-term goal right in front. You want to start with the short term. Then as the players interact, the directions that they go are going to shape the long-term goals. So the short-term goals you can make, start with you kind of presenting them to the players and then seeing which ones they go for. And then keeping, when you have NPCs that are interacting with the players, as you think about things, problems the NPCs run into, problems the players create. This is a classic. So, for example, I had some players there were these people that lived, kind of wild people that lived in this very desolate area. And the players, through their actions, had this trading post these people had got destroyed. So now these people were bereft of any income. And this created a goal, both short term to get these people, first they wanted to resettle them somewhere, then they wanted to get them some money, but eventually it turned into a long-term goal of how do we create a new homeland for these people? And it was created out of the players' actions. They were searching for this guy and they found him, that had stolen from them, and their short-term goal was to defeat this guy, and then the long-term goal came out of that. Goals are what keeps us motivated in real life, right? If you have a job and you just say, yeah, I'm going to stay in this particular position, I'm going to do this same thing for the next 40 years. I don't know if that's a goal. Usually you say, I want to learn this and get promoted and do this, or I want to go to another job or whatever. You have goals. You have a long term. I want to be the president of the company. But short term, I got to do this job for the next year so that I can learn this and then promote to this division and that, and then build up to that long-term goal. That's what motivates us in life, our goals. And it's the same thing in an RPG game. So these short-term goals at the beginning of a campaign, we're going to deliver this item to this place, or we're going to be a caravan guard for here, or we've heard about this village that's having mysterious things happen at night or something like, an NPC comes to the players and says, my daughter is missing, when can you find her? And that's a short term. It may turn into some long-term thing where they can't find her for a long time. But the initial idea is we're going to go and look, see what happened, where she disappeared, blah, blah, blah. And that's a short-term goal. Because the secret is it's the goals of the campaign that are created, both short and long, that keep the players invested. And then along the way, they will gain those abilities and items and powers that are often confused as the end goals of an RPG game. Now, one of the classic ways of getting players invested in goals is to tie them to their backstories. But I would say always use caution with this. First of all, you may not have players that are adept at creating or interested at creating elaborate backstories. But you might also feel like, oh, you are tying something to me that I don't necessarily want. It just comes out of my backstory. Your mother's been kidnapped is my favorite bad example, right? You kidnapped my character's mother? Really? Talk about railroading. So you got to be careful. But if it's a goal that can be either it's short term and not too complicated, so the player's brother comes to town and said, something's going on at the family farm, I need your help, and the players go there and have a short adventure, that's okay. If it's long term in terms of the family farm has been beset by some, let's say, some blight on the crops, and you discover that some weird creeping evil is coming from some place, and you manage to cure the blight there, but you've got to figure out where is this coming from as a long-term goal. If the players are interested, they might fix the blight and have other things to do. But that's out there as a long-term goal. What's going on here? What's causing this blight? So you just got to be careful with backstory, tying it there. You want the players to make the decision that this is our goal. And in both short-term and long-term goals, you want to have flexibility in how the players approach it. If they hear about this village that's being harassed by orcs, they could just go there, investigate, and attack the orcs, or they might negotiate with the orcs, or they might find someone else to help them, or they might research the history and see what's going on with these orcs. Something like that, where there's many different ways to potentially solve this short-term goal. Because that makes your world more interesting, more dynamic, seem more real. Long-term goals, the same thing. If there's some evil big bad villain, which I don't recommend, but let's just say you have that, there should be many different ways of achieving the goal of defeating them. Maybe it's uniting all the cities of your world to, gather together an army and take them on head on. Maybe it's sneaking into this villain's headquarters or lair or whatever and getting some critical item. Maybe it's finally convincing this old wizard that's, a total hermit that he needs to help the players, and then they do a favor for him, and then they go on some other thing. And all the while, the goal is the same, but the means of achieving the goals are flexible. If your goal in life is to get rich, there are many ways to do it. Now, if it's winning the lottery or becoming a rock star, that's going to be tough, right? But if you say, I'm going to save 10% of my income and put it into a mutual fund, that may be a viable way of achieving your goal. And the players have the same thing. And you might have multiple ways to invest or whatever, or make a career choice that gets you a lot of money, get educated in training and all that kind of stuff. Those are different ways of achieving goals. Some are good ways and some are not so great. Another interesting way to think about goals is to have sort of a moral conflict, right? So let's say the orcs, have been forced off their ancestral home, and this village has been built on their most sacred ground, and they want it back. So do the players go and defend the villagers and, wipe out the orcs? Do they negotiate? If they negotiate, the orcs are like, we want them to move. Can they create something else? Can the players create a better place to resettle these villagers? They have to make those decisions. And again, they can see sort of both sides. The villagers, that village may have been there for 100 years. The orcs were forced off, and then they've come back. A new generation were determined to get their old land back. Well, these villagers are like, we don't want to leave. We don't have anywhere to go. This is where we live. Again, how do you make that decision? And do you convince them of this? Do the players go and get some items? Do they get a land grant to some really incredible fertile land? Can the orcs, depending on, again, if it's their most sacred ancestral home, that can be tough. So you as a GM may want to, tone that down a bit. But you can see where the players are going to be they're going to want to solve this problem. Moral quandaries make the goal more interesting because it's more satisfying to figure out how to do it. If it's just get enough power, go fight the big bad villain, kill him, okay. But if it's discover what it is about this villain, what's motivating this villain. And in fact, the villain says, yes, something was stolen from me by these so-called highfalutin good people in your world, and I'm determined to get my revenge. Well, is there some way to assuage that? Is there some way for them to, do right by this person? But you can see that goal becomes interesting because there's a conflict there between what the players, the typical thing they want and what might be more interesting. Another aspect is to make goals personal. Now, I already talked about tying into the backstory to make goals personal, but the better way to do it is make goals personal to what the players are doing in your world once they actually started running. So they're doing some business at the low levels of transporting goods, and they push some people around or whatever, and they come back, and the person they're working for, his place has been burned down. Well, the players, short term, they're going to want revenge. And then long term, they're going to want to try to rebuild this person's business, maybe start their own. Now they're invested now. And again, some players have no interest in doing any kind of business or creating some kind of empire. Again, they just want to go up in level and get stuff. But taking part in that process of helping this person, you got to gauge your party how much they're going to be interested in that. But you get a goal that's personal to them. And man, will they will never forget that. I had this player, the character got killed by this thing, and they were determined to this players were determined to get a resurrect spell to bring this player back. After this guy had run a couple other characters, and finally near the very end of this campaign, they got it. And they were very satisfied. So that was a long-term goal that came out of this character getting killed. He sacrificed himself so that the party could live early on in the campaign. And they were determined to resurrect him, I guess whether he wanted to or not. And, short-term goals are pretty much just the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts of campaigns, that as they're trying to achieve a long-term, they might be related, but they might just be one-offs, monster of the week kind of things. But the long-term goals, I think, can evolve as the players explore your world and as they come across more situations where, as I say, initially they just want to help this person get their business back that got burned down. Then they begin to realize, hey, we might be able to help this person and create this shipping thing, buy some ships or something like that. Or this person actually, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to retire or something. The players take this over or give it to someone else. I mean, that the long-term goal of helping this person can evolve. And it can evolve out of the players' interaction when they go do this shipping thing or whatever. They meet some people or they learn more about what's going on with the commerce between these cities. And they realize, hey, actually, what might be smarter, instead of just having this store, to just be the middleman trading back and forth. And that's going to help this person, and it's going to help us because now we have ships where we can travel to places. When we get higher level, we want to, kind of go around having to walk to places. We want to get things quickly, and this will help us move. And then we have this person that we saved who kind of owes us this favor. So make sure you think about how goals can evolve through the players' activities and let them create these ideas. When they propose things like this, say yes, as I always say, and think of ways in which that goal, because when the goals shift, just like when you're young, you might have goals that as you get older in life, you realize, well, that's really not, I'm not going to be a rock star, right? But I might be a middle manager at this company, or I might own the company, or I might want to start my own business. I never thought I wanted to, but as I go through life, I realize that's what I want to do. So if our goals evolve in life, your players can too as they work their way through your world and increase their level. And the final thing I'll say about this is if you've got a dynamic world, if you've got a world in which the players are interacting and making things happen, they're the protagonist and antagonist of the story while they're watching it and making it, right? You can have competing goals. You can have a variety of things that can be both short-term, should we do this or should we do this? And those goals might be important. This is why having the players, your mother is kidnapped, one of the players is going to go do it. I don't care about these other things. We got to save my mom. So you got to be careful. Again, those backstory things are risky. But if you've got two kind of equal short-term goals, which one do we take? And by competing, it means if I do this, I might lose out on this. Other adventurers or the flooded caverns will be flooded again for 1,000 years, something like that. Again, you have two things that one might go away, and that's a competing goal. And then long term, we're helping these people solve this issue, but it's more in our interest to maybe help the other side, but we know they're sort of morally corrupt. The classic is there's an artifact, and one player in the group or several say, hey, we could use this. We can tame this. And another says, oh, no, let's say they're a cleric or a champion. This thing is, it's not a good item. It needs to be destroyed. And then the third player says, let's sell it. Let's sell it to a collector who will keep it safe. Right? I don't want to just destroy this. And so now you have these competing goals: destroy the item, use the item, sell the item. And how does that work out? Can they come up with a compromise, right? Because what will often happen in a good RPG homebrewed sandbox is the players will all create goals on their own, or goals. It's not just all the party. It's different things things that they are vested in, their character backgrounds, but also their class and what they decide they're interested in your world. Because they'll come across things that interest them, cities or I want to explore that dungeon. I want to go back to that dungeon at some point and figure out what's going on. That's a long-term goal I have. And the other players may not want to. Okay, let's do this first and that and this. And, that, again, when you have those goals, it keeps you invested. It keeps you wanting to come back and keep running so that we can finish them. And a shout out to my Patreon supporters. This week was feasts, and I developed some sample feasts for them. Got more coming up. I really, really appreciate your support. And as always, if you like my content, please subscribe, give a like, give me a comment on goals that you've done as a GM or ones you've enjoyed as a player. And most importantly, my friends, keep playing an RPG game, whichever one you choose, and tell somebody else about it.